Hello, and welcome to the Hogancast, a weekly podcast where we discuss a variety of subjects. Each week, we talk about a different topic, from literature to travel and everything in between. Our episodes strive to be both conversational and informational, and our occasional interviews are hopefully entertaining. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hogancast. I am your host, Scott Hogan, and joining me again is my lovely wife, Huyen. So, Huyen, I was looking at the news today, and I found a story from Japan where this Japanese professor has invented a television that you can actually lick and taste the food that's on the screen, which is kind of cool. He said he wants to do it for people that won't be able to travel so that they have a chance to taste food from around the world. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be really great to be able to do that right now and taste some Thai food? Because it's been so long since we had Thai food. We have a couple Thai restaurants in Martinsburg, but it's not real Thai food. Yeah, Nancy, do you miss Thai food?
I do miss Thai food, but back to your story about the new innovation from Japan. I don't know whether I like that idea. I actually prefer tasting the food myself. But I agree with you that Thai food is one of the most popular cuisines in the world, and I like for its distinct and strong flavors. It is a blend of sweet, bitter, sour, and salty flavors. And to me, Thai food is like a perfect marriage of Eastern and Western culinary. You can taste a bit of Chinese, Portuguese, Dutch, and French. Similar to Vietnamese food, Thai food is quite healthy. A lot of green vegetables and herbs are used in it. One of the distinct features I have found about Thai food is that it uses a lot of chilies. Vietnamese food is also hot and spicy, but not to the level of Thai food. It used to be a culture shock to me when I first arrived in Thailand. The Thais have saying, "Mai pad, mai aroi," meaning if it isn't spicy, it isn't tasty. So, do you know that chilies initially came to Thailand during the late 1600s by Portuguese missionaries and traders who had brought them in from South America? But that's interesting. I always thought chilies were native to Thailand. Remember when we first came to Martinsburg, I tried to find Thai chilies, but I couldn't. So I tried to grow them. First year was not successful, but this year we had so many chilies to use in several Thai dishes that we both like.
I really, really love Thai chilies, so it was really nice that you were able to grow them.
So Scott, I know that you love history and you know a lot about history. Do you know that Thailand was the only Southeast Asian country to escape European colonialism?
Yeah, I do, Nancy. It's actually a really cool story how they were able to do that. Thailand is kind of situated between British Burma and what would become French Indochina. And to the south is also the Dutch East Indies. So it had three colonial powers surrounding it. But what they did, they had some initial conflicts with the French. The French made them, the French kind of wanted them to give territory back to Vietnam, territory that will eventually become Laos and Cambodia. But it was just a little bit of territory. And after that, the Thai kings of the time, which was Rama IV and Rama V, during the height of the European colonization, which is King Mongkut and then King Chulalongkorn, they were able to kind of use their unique situation to kind of promote themselves as a buffer state between the two empires. So the French and the British and the Dutch saw Thailand as being like a buffer state, which would be beneficial to all the powers involved. And plus, Thailand had contacts with the West all the way back to the 16th, 17th centuries when it was known as Ayutthaya and Sukhothai before that. They'd always had outside trade with particularly the Portuguese. So all these Western powers were really familiar with what they called Siam at the time, but we would call Thailand today. So they were willing to let but they were willing to view Thailand more as a buffer state than as a potential colony. And they even signed agreements with Thailand promising that Thailand would always remain independent and they had no ambitions to colonize the country. Yeah, it's really amazing that they were able to do that.
Yeah, Thai people are so lucky. Not like Vietnam was colonized by the French for 6 decades. Do you know the country's name in the Thai language is Pratet Thai, which means land of the free.
That's true. I do want to say one thing, because a lot of my fellow Americans I know do not know this. I mentioned it briefly when I was answering your question about avoiding colonization, but Thailand was known as Siam. So if you have a Siamese cat and you have no idea where Siam is and you've always wondered where your Siamese cat originally came from, it's Thailand. Siam is the old name of Thailand. So I just wanted to let my Americans in on that little secret because I bet a lot of them didn't know that.
Yeah, right. I also heard a story around the name of Bangkok. Would you mind sharing more about that?
First of all, we need to remember that Ayutthaya was at one time the main capital of Siam or Thailand. And then there was a war with the Burmese and Ayutthaya was pretty much destroyed completely. And so they moved the kingdom first to Thonburi, but then they moved it to this little village, which was called Bangkok, which meant village of wild plums or something like that, village of wild olives, or I can't remember exactly, but that's what it means. And eventually it would be renamed into what the Thais refer to as Krungthep Mahanakorn, which means City of Angels. But the actual name of Bangkok is the longest name of any city in the world. And I'm not going to try to say it because my Thai is not that good and I would probably really mess it up. But it means something along the lines of the City of Angels. And then there's a lot of other things that, like, it was created by gods, by the order of the gods and things like that. It's a really cool name, very descriptive. One thing about Bangkok is it has really great weather.
Yeah, I totally agree. Bangkok is the world's hottest city, besides having the longest name in the world, with a median air temperature of 28 Celsius, so roughly 82 Fahrenheit. Thailand has 3 seasons in a year: hot, cool, and wet. However, there is a joke that the 3 seasons in Thailand actually hotter, and hottest. And the funny thing is, what considered to be cold in Thailand is around 60 Fahrenheit, probably around 16 Celsius.
Yeah, I do love the weather because it's always so nice, but it can be really, really hot sometimes, especially when you haven't been in Thailand before or you haven't been there for a while. The heat can really beat down on you, and rain can often come out of nowhere. Is there anything like when you first went to Thailand or like something that happened in Thailand hadn't happened to other countries, something that, you know, maybe surprised you when you were there?
Yeah, one of the things that really was a culture shock to me is that Thai national anthems is played twice a day and before every film at the movie theater. I remember when I first went to see the movie in Thailand, suddenly I heard the music played. At that time, I didn't know that it was the Thai national anthem. And I saw people all stand up and I start getting panicked. I thought there was a fire until I realized that people was paying respect to the national anthem. I also learned to stop, stand up and keep silent if I were in a public place during 8 a.m. and 6 p.m.
Yeah, that I can remember many times getting off the BTS train or being at the BTS station and everyone just stopping. It's kind of a really cool thing to see. Like you have like maybe 1,000 people at the train station and everybody just stops in their tracks while the national anthem plays. Now, Nancy, you studied Thai a little bit. Could you tell me a little bit about the Thai language?
Yeah, we lived in Bangkok for about 6 years. So I did take a lot of classes to get myself familiar with the language and to help me get around Bangkok better. So the Thai language has 76 letters, 44 consonants and 33 vowels. Similar to Vietnamese language, Thai language is very tonal language that includes 5 different tones. So mid, low, falling, high, rising tones. So here it is. Na, 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 na. Can you hear the difference, Scott?
A little bit, because I actually learned about this in Thai culture class as well.
Nice. Yeah, they all sound the same for those who don't use tonal language. The tricky part is getting an inflection wrong can make the meaning different. That's why the Thai language can be challenging to understand. So here is my story of getting an inflection wrong. So cloi, falling tone for banana. Cloi, low tone meaning for the male private part. At the time I was studying Thai language, I was so eager to put it in practice. So I approached the cashier and said with the confidence, "Kloi di tarai ka?" meaning how much for this male private part. The cashier just stared at me and tried so hard to hold back his laugh. I guess I was forgiven for being a foreigner who just tried to practice the language.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I don't know if you remember, but when we were living in Khon Kaen, a lot of times I would try to tell the taxi driver, the tuk-tuk driver, to take me to where our village was. I still don't know what I said wrong, but I would say our village was called Saiphone, and I thought I said it right every time. No taxi driver or tuk-tuk would ever understand me until I had said it about 20 times. I had to, say Saiphone, 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 like any way I could think to say it. And eventually they would be like, "Oh, Saiphone, okay. And we would go. But like it usually like a 5-minute conversation before I could get anybody to take me home. But yeah, the language is a little bit tricky. Do you think you remember any Thai language?
I think I can have a simple conversation with people. For example, asking how are you, what you are doing, how much it is. And last time I listened to a conversation on the TV, and I think I understand about 60 to 70% of what they were saying.
And what's cool about Thais is a lot of times they don't use their real names. They'll use their nicknames, like Chulin, like you go by Nancy instead of Huyen. So I think, Thai names in general can be quite long, but their nicknames are usually kind of short and easier to say. And it's a lot of times they'll go just by the nickname instead of their real name. So I think that's a pretty interesting thing.
So, Scott, what is your first impression when you land in Thailand?
So for me, I was in the Navy, and we pulled in. Well, we didn't pull in. We pulled off the shore of Pattaya Beach. So my first time in Thailand was in Pattaya. I think I was like 19 years old. I didn't know much about Thailand before we actually went there. Pattaya at that time was really like a party city. It was a lot of fun. I went to Pattaya quite a few times with the Navy. There are nicer beaches in Thailand, but Pattaya is just, it's hard to explain if you've never been there, but it's a really fun city to visit. The nightlife is really great. Obviously you have Thai food and street food, and there's a lot of Western influence there because originally it was for American soldiers who were fighting the war in Vietnam. But the first time I actually went to Bangkok was a few years later. I decided to visit Bangkok because I'd never really been before. I can remember landing at that time. It was still Don Mueang Airport, taking a taxi. I think I was staying in Sukhumvit Soi 11, which is a pretty fun area to stay in. And I just remember walking out and just seeing all the skyscrapers in Bangkok and the SkyTrain. And it's such a hectic city, but it's also options to get around the city. Don't you think that Bangkok is a pretty easy city to get around?
Yeah, I do agree. Especially public transit. I love public transportation in Bangkok. To me, it ticks all the boxes. It's clean, fast, affordable, and especially fewer emissions. as you know that I'm working in to promote clean energy and support greenhouse gas emission reductions. Unlike Vietnam that only started the metro operation last month, Bangkok has a well-developed urban transportation system, including SkyTrain and subway. The SkyTrain and metro to be the most convenient way to travel around the city. Taxis a fairly affordable way as well to get around the city. The local also use what they call tuk-tuk, or is similar to three-wheelers vehicle. But I don't think private vehicles are the best option to travel around a busy, often congested Bangkok. Thailand has gained international notoriety for the world's most traffic jam. Roads are congested almost 24 hours. Like you said earlier, Scott, Bangkok is just almost like never sleep. So traffic happen all the time. So the best way to get around Bangkok is to use public transit. For scenic view of the city, you can hop on public riverboat. These riverboats stop at some of the city major sites, such as the Grand Palace, that used to be the royal residency, and they still use this for most of the important national ceremonies. And inside the Grand Palace is also the home of Wat Prakel, which housed the Jade Buddha, and Wat Pho is best known for the temple of the reclining Buddha, which is about 45 meters long and 15 meters high, roughly 148 feet long and 49 feet high. The riverboats also stop at Wat Arun, the Temple of Dawn. Do you remember the time that we went on the boat to Wat Arun on our third date? And we stopped at the local coffee shop with cool pop music decoration behind the temple. I think we should go back there and find that coffee shop when this pandemic is over.
So yeah, I remember that coffee shop. I don't know if you remember that they also had like a lot of Native American posters and stuff around there. And the owner and his wife were always super nice when we came in there. They always wanted to talk English, and they were so excited that you were from Vietnam. What's your experiences with Thai people in general?
To me, Thai people are amazing. They are friendly, always smile. That's why Thailand is known as the land of smiles. I never forget my first encounter with Thai people. When I first arrived in Thailand, I lived in a small town in the northeastern part of Thailand. At that time, I didn't have any type of vehicle, so I walked to the office. And then there was a lady on a motorbike approached me and asked me where I was going. And she told me, hop in a bike, and just that, she drove me to my office. I was truly shocked. I live in a cynical world so long, and I have been told not offering to ride with strangers. But here I was, being taken in by a completely stranger. I would never forget that.
Yeah, Thai people are really awesome. But, we shouldn't act like it's just Bangkok. There's a lot of really beautiful places in Thailand. Like I mentioned Pattaya before. We've both been to Phuket. Phuket's gorgeous. And we've both been to Ayutthaya, which is the old capital. One time I was lucky enough, I was able to take a river cruise up to Ayutthaya, see all the temples, and cruise along the Chao Phraya, which was just a really, really cool experience. But in general, Bangkok is one of the most popular tourist destinations in Southeast Asia. I think it is the most, well, before COVID, they had the most tourists of any city in the world. I think it had moved up to number one, even more than Paris by that time. So, what I think that makes Bangkok so popular is, it's such a cool mix. Like, number one, it's famous around the world. It used to be called the Venice of the East. I don't know if you know this, Nancy, but a lot of the roads that we used to drive on or ride on, a few years ago, they were rivers. And so like Bangkok had canals instead of roads, and we called it the Venice of the East because, Venice has rivers that you go along. Bangkok has a world famous nightlife. The food is amazing. It's pretty easy to get around, like we talked about. Pretty affordable for a capital city. It's not too expensive. And it's just a really fun city. It's a little bit different than some of the other cities where there was a lot more Western influence in the construction and the design of the city. So I think Bangkok is such a great place. And we lived there for 7 years, and it's pretty much second home to us. We were hoping to go back pretty soon, but unfortunately it looks like we got Omicron and we're not going to be able to go for a little bit longer than we thought. But, we'll always want to go back to Thailand. What about you, Nancy?
Yeah, I put that in my bucket list for 2022. I always want to go back there.
Yeah, me too. I really miss Thailand. Sometimes I really regret that we left and moved. We had a lot of fun there. We'll end it there this week. Just remember that you can reach us at thehogancast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at thehogancast. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. So thanks a lot for joining us this week and listening to our third episode. We'll try to be back next week. But for now, happy holidays, and we really thank you for listening.
Right. It has been fun to be able to share all of my fond memories about Thailand. I really wish to go back there, but for now, wish you a wonderful holiday and great year ahead. Bye bye.